first thunderous roar. I can see her rising now as she's going up straight into the roll program, which she should be completing. We should expect to hear from the astronaut.
Everybody's got their heads bowed down. The sun don't shine above the ground. Ain't it going back to Oxford town? He went down to Oxford town. Guns and clubs followed him down. All because his face was brown. Better get away from Oxford town. What do you think about that, my friend? Me and my gal son, we got met with a tear gas bomb. I don't even know why we come, going back where we come from. Everybody singing a sorrowful tune. 2 men died beneath the Mississippi moon. Somebody better investigate soon. Everybody's got their heads bowed down. The sun don't shine above the ground. Ain't it going back to Oxford town? Ain't it going back to Oxford town? Ain't it going back to Oxford town?
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Ben from Universal Audio, and welcome back to another Luna Office Hours. Happy Monday. Hope everybody had a great weekend. It was a nice little holiday weekend for us here over in the States. So we all got outside, barbecued, enjoyed some time with loved ones. But now we're back, and it's Monday, which means that we're here to answer your guys' questions, show you some cool stuff inside of Luna, and just have some fun making music. So let's jump right into it. If you guys have got questions, hit us up in the chat. And if you have songs that you would like us to feature in our countdown little intro there, feel free to hit us up live@uaudio.com. That's the email address. It's a secret little handshake between us of where to go and submit music. We love hearing from you guys. The music so far has just been astounding. And whether you're making it in Luna or just making it with Apollos, we love hearing what you guys are doing. So if you got music to share and that you would like to have featured, hit us up there. If you've got photos that you want to see featured, just hashtag Universal Audio over on Instagram. And we'll be pulling those in and continuing to make these new, fresh countdowns for every single show, which is really cool to see. So yeah, let's dive in. Let's answer some questions and show you guys some cool stuff. And we got Drew and Matt with us today. How you guys doing?
What's going on, Ben?
Nice. You guys have a good weekend?
Oh yeah, great weekend.
Yeah. No fireworks fires. No nothing bad, right?
I actually had one pretty close to me, but the house is all right. So, knock on wood.
You lucked out.
Yeah.
And Drew, you've rearranged your studio. It looks a little different than
things around a little bit.
Yeah, your board kind of grew and changed brands. It's strange.
Yeah, it is. It's a weird thing here. I'm burning the candle at both ends. Bumping things right up against each other. So
nice.
We're in another studio today, so I'm kind of doing a commando style, I guess you'd say. Here on the laptop.
Well, underwear was never required on the show, by the way. Just.
Waist up only.
Exactly. Nice. Well, great. So, we've got a couple things on our docket to be able to kind of jump into, but while we were during the intro, we did get a couple of good questions coming in. So I feel like there would be a good place to start. And Francois over on Facebook was asking, what do I do with Q1 and 2? And there's no better perfect person to answer this than Drew, because we did just do a 2.5 hour ARM deep dive. So inside there we talk a ton about Qs, but just really briefly and quickly, what do Q1 and 2 use for?
Yeah, so for the long answer, please go check out the Luna deep dive from July 2nd, and we go through it in great detail. The short answer is that the Qs are a low latency paths built into your Apollo that allow you to feed a separate or discrete mix to the artist, right? So there's plenty of times where maybe you're doing drums and the drummer wants the click track really loud and you in the control room don't want to hear the click track at all, or maybe a lot lower, or maybe you're doing vocals and the vocalist wants to hear themselves, some vocalists love to hear themselves really hot, and then others want themselves, to be kind of turned down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, as an engineer, that's one of the things that one of our tools that's in our toolkit is, if I have a singer who is singing a little timid, I will purposely pull them down in the Q a little,
mm-hmm.
and I starve them of themselves a little bit, and that'll cause them to push a little bit more. And the reverse is true. If someone's being too aggressive, you can kind of push them up in the Q, and that'll cause them to pull back or come back off the mic. So there's little tricks you can do there. So, but generally the Qs are like just separate, discrete pathways that allow you to feed different mixes to the artists.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely check out the ARM deep dive because we went through it, in great detail. So.
Right? Yeah, that was such a marathon, but it was so cool to just see, kind of cover the entire lay of the land of how low latency monitoring works with Apollo and Luna. Just all the possibilities, all the different workflows, like whether you're doing a big tracking session or a smaller overdub session or just, producing music by yourself, ARM and even the Q sends, like those are important things to know about and be able to have full power over.
Yeah, the feedback from that episode seems to have been good. Over the weekend, I was watching things and thankfully people seemed to really enjoy it. It was super nerdy and techy and long, but it seems like, knock on wood, it was pretty well received, So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Great. So, and then that kind of leads us. There was another early question, and I swear I'll catch up to the questions that are flowing in now. But Ian was asking, how would you set up parallel compression on a vocal in Luna? And that's a really good one. Let me share my screen, and I've got a session here. It doesn't have a vocal in it, but it does have keyboards, which we're gonna pretend are our vocals today. So there's actually a couple of different ways to do this. Like the most, number one way to do it. This is the way that I think we all learned parallel compression. When we started out, at least for me, it was using a send. So you hit the send button. It brings up over here on the focus panel your routing selector. So then you can add, a new bus. I can call it vocal parallel. Ooh, I spelled it right. I'm so proud of myself. I never get that word right. So now I've got a send to my vocal parallel, and then on here I can throw on, an 1176. And there we go. Bob's your uncle. Now we've got parallel compression. So this track is sending, the dry signal, the regular signal is still flowing out to my main output, but now via the send, it's also going to this parallel bus. So now I can have my way with it over here. I can compress the crap out of it and just blend that in. And that's the great thing about doing it this way is this is a additive process. So I love doing this for drums. And Drew, I think you talked about this too in your ARM demo or maybe last week's office hours where we were talking about, the difference between using a wet dry knob as compared to a send return scenario is this is adding level. This is adding energy. And this is a great way to, especially for drums, for vocals, if you're finding yourself like halfway through the mix and you're like, man, I just need to jump out and have a little bit more energy, a little bit more excitement, a little more support. And you don't want it to feel more compressed because, compressing more and more on the individual channel, it's going to be messing with your overall level and it can make it feel a little squeezed.
Yeah.
This allows you to squeeze it. And, I often love to overdo it here on the parallel side and then bring that up underneath the uncompressed signal. So this is kind of the number one way to set that up, but it's not the only way to set it up. So now
one of the cool things about doing it that way, Ben, is like you were saying in a mix, like that additive nature and having it on a fader instead of being buried in the GUI of a plugin. Sometimes it's nice to have it on that fader so that you can kind of ride it and push it into a mix. In addition to adding compression, but you're adding level too. So that's a really good way about that method.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But and what's great about this too is you can share this amongst tracks. So I can send, I can send this other synth track. I can also tell it go to my vocal parallel bus, and now you're sharing that compression. You can make background vocals work together to all push the compressor. But this isn't the only way to do it. So let me just remove these as sends. So that bus is still here. I've still created this bus and. There's another way to get to there, and this was a fun tip I learned from Vance on that very first week. His very first mix that he did in Luna, that Rival Sun song, he had set up his drum parallel compression differently than I had done it before. So what you can do is, say I have these 4 tracks I want to parallel compress. Right now they're all being routed to my main output. If I click on the main output with all 4 of these selected, see how. This is one of those nice visual details. You see how these are all kind of blue? This is how you know that you're about to act on all 4 of these outputs. I can now hit, if I hit vocal parallel, I've now just reassigned them all to there. It's not quite what I want. What I actually want is I want to leave them in the main, but then hit shift, not shift. You want to hit command. Oopsies, there we go. Command, vocal parallel. So now you can see the routing. It's saying it's now going to multiple buses. And you can see that I'm now going to my vocal parallel and my main. So this is another really quick way to be able to route signals to multiple buses. You can do this, as you saw. You can continue to do this. You can route things to as many buses as you like. But the only downside with doing it this way is that you don't have that individual level control. So these are now following your fader control down here. Which can be a good thing. This is all, kind of do it to taste. Figure out which way you want to do it. And sometimes it makes more sense to do it this way. Sometimes it makes more sense to do it, using the send return scenario.
And keep in mind, remember, Ben, you can do that multi-assign thing to the sends.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a pretty neat thing. I'm not aware of other apps that do that, but yeah, you can do multi-assignments to a send. So if you have your original track and you from the same send you could send to the 1176 and a 160. If desired.
That's which is really cool. That you can use now. I'm using this one send to send to both my parallel and my room, just as an example. So that's there we go. That's two different ways to do it. And then there's one final way, and this is the a lot of UAD plugins and a lot of third-party plugins, honestly, too. They have a mix knob in them, and so this is another way to effectively be doing parallel compression. This one, it's a little bit less of a bringing the energy up underneath it and more of a like, let me compress it. I'm compressing a little too much. Let me let some of that dry signal back in. Is typically how I approach a mix knob like this. But yeah, this is theoretically, it is actually just parallel compression on a single knob, all inside of a plugin, without having to create a bus, without having to do any routing stuff. But the downside is you can't share this compression. This is now just on this one track as an insert.
And that really makes it suited for the stereo bus. Like that's where that's pretty much the only place not the only place, but it's the primary place I'll use that wet dry, the dry comp knob, because trying to do the send style parallel compression for an entire mix is pretty daunting, right? It's certainly a lot easier with the mix knob on the mix bus.
Well, we got a question. So, all things Jordan, why can't we do parallel processing with ARM recording? Drew, we covered this a little bit, I think, during your ARM deep dive. Why is it not recommended to do parallel processing while in ARM? Yeah,
because the buses, there is a 32 sample delay in the send to a bus thing. Even though you declare a bus as an ARM enabled bus, there is those 32 samples of delay. So if you go back to the ARM deep dive video, we showed you how to get around that using a distress or using a mix knob, where you can do it. It can be done. But you don't want to be doing it on an ARM enabled aux live while trying to blend that in with that, because there is a little bit of latency there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's absolutely.
John had a good question on YouTube. In Luna, is there a difference in terms of signal path between turning down clips versus turning down the fader? So if you want to reduce the volume by 6 dB, you can do it at the clip level or the fader level.
Yep. Huge difference. Yeah.
The real difference is how hard you're hitting whatever processing you have going on that channel, which could be tape extensions, but also any plugins you have loaded. So if you actually lower the clip gain by 6 dB, whatever processing you have in the channel, tape extensions or plugins, you're going to be hitting it 6 dB lower. So you're going to be getting a different, character out of them.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just lower the fader, you're just lowering the signal at the end of the signal chain after it's already been processed. So you're still hitting all your processing at the same level. You're just changing the final volume.
Yeah,
so it really depends on what you're going for.
It totally does, and especially, I don't know about you guys, but I love using like drum loops and stuff, pre-recorded material, stuff from other people. One thing I always notice about drum loops, or just any loops in general, a lot of times they come in, they normalize them, and they're like they go super 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 loud. It'll dry, and this is kind of the nice thing. We've mentioned this before of like having the tape extension built into Luna. This is a VU meter that's in the signal path. You're coming clip through your tape, then into your inserts, sending off to your sends, sending off to your cues, then the pan pots and fader. So the signal path of it, being able to do a clip gain, you're now able to affect the gain before it hits any of these things. So having the meter here, if you see this just blowing out in red and you're like, it sounds a little extra, maybe a little too crunchy. The best way to make that adjustment, of course, you can come in and change the saturation over here, but that's not going to have as large of an effect on the overall gain structure of your track as coming in and applying some clip gain and bringing it down to a more reasonable level. And then, of course, you can get really creative with this sort of stuff of, going, intentionally lower, so that way you're hitting kind of the under, the kind of under the sweet spot. It's kind of an interesting way to do it. So if you come in under the sweet spot, you're not getting a lot of the tape color, but then you could follow it up with something, like a Neve plugin or, something that has gain as a part of it. And then you can just start adding more gain, either, using the gain knob or by adding EQ or using the fader. There's so many different ways to do gain structure inside of Luna. We actually did, and Matt, you did a great deep dive about gain structure. What was that, like 2 weeks ago on our Monday show? I think, I'm pretty sure I went back and retitled it, so it was a lot easier to find. But yeah, we did a whole episode about Unison gain structure, and kind of gain staging in general inside of Luna.
Yeah, and what you're talking about with kind of lowering the clip gain and then using a preamp after, that's a really cool way to kind of like reamp drum loops and samples and things like that. You can bring a lot more character into them.
Mm-hmm. Yep, make them your own. Especially if you're using samples, man. That's kind of my favorite thing to do is mess around with the pitch, mess around with the time, mess around with the saturation on it, and before you know it, it's become your own, and it's kind of starting to fit the vibe of whatever it is that you're working on.
Yeah, totally.
Ben, I've seen some people wonder, how do I turn down the level of just a section, right? Like, so if let's say I just wanted to do that one drum or something in your loop, right?
Yeah. So the easiest way to do that is to select the area that you want to turn down. So let's say just this one kick drum. This was bothering me. This is like, wow, that's hitting way too hard. Select the area, press B to separate it, and then you'll see now I can control the gain of just that clip on its own. So that's the quick and easy way to do it. There's also, as you'll notice, I kind of had to I zoomed in here to be able to display the numbers. So even if I'm zoomed out though, what you can do is you can double click up here on the top of the bar, and it brings up this clip info. So it lets you change the name, lets you do a bunch of things, but one of them is this gain knob, which now allows me to adjust that. So yeah, if you're not able to see it, or especially like if I'm kind of out here in this arrangement view, I can double click on any clip and change around the gain, change around the pitch, change the warping type. You get a bunch of different clip properties that you can easily access there by double clicking.
Awesome. Yeah, that's something I see people asking about pretty frequently.
Mm-hmm. Nice. All right, so we kind of promised people we talk a little bit about like a console emulation workflow. So I guess while I've got this pulled up here, this is something, Drew, I know you've also been really interested in kind of exploring on your side. But so essentially, this is one of the unique features of Luna is that we have built-in Neve summing. But I guess the question from a lot of people is, how come the Neve summing is only on my main output and my buses? Why don't I have any Neve something on individual audio tracks?
Yeah, when you start talking about console automation, that's kind of, and it's totally understandable. You think about emulating a console. It's like, well, the summing and the buses are what we focus on with the Neve summing, and therefore they're on the main outs and they're on the buses. But people are wondering what is it? So what aspect of analog console emulation? What am I doing on a per channel basis, right? So that's what this is going to be all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And so that's exactly the real sound of the Neve is when you add all that stuff together. But if you're looking for, if you want complete console automation or emulation, sorry, one of the ways to get to there is to use something like a Neve 1073, 1084 Vision channel strip, SSL E channel, just some sort of console channel work plugin, similar to having the Studer as your tape machine, making that first insert a 1073 or 1084. I've now kind of added the channel color of the Neve to that individual channel.
Yeah, it's pretty subtle. It's pretty subtle, but if you look at it on an analyzer, even just inserting a 1073 or 1084, and you look at the harmonic content creation, it's doing something. It's subtle, but it's doing something, and the additive nature of all of that really kind of stacks on top of everything, and then feeds into summing, and then Bob's your uncle, right?
Why does everyone have an Uncle Bob? I don't get it. But this is something I think a lot of people discover, when you start using UAD plugins, you start noticing like, wow, by just adding a Pultec EQP1A to my track, not moving any of the knobs, not lifting it from zero, not changing the gain, why does it sound a little bit different? It sounds different. It usually sounds better, but that's because these emulations, these faithfully model the tubes, the transformers, and just like in real life, if you patch in a Pultec or you patch in a Fairchild, you go through your Neve, no matter what no matter what the settings are on there, even if they're all at zero, it still does a little something to the sound. And that's exactly right. And this is where it's fun to get, really picky about this sort of stuff. So, you can build an entire Neve console by using some Neve channel strips, going into a Neve summing, and then, maybe cap it off with a Neve bus compressor, the 33609. But, the thing I like doing is kind of picking and choosing, right? So being able to say like, Cool. I love the Neves on my drums, but actually on the Space, let me pull up the API Vision Series console because it's a little bit faster. It's got a little bit different character and some different controls, as well as having the dynamics controls built in. This is everything I need for my bass in one spot. So yeah, you can start kind of mix and match and choose at will and build a very analog inspired console workflow very, very simply inside of Luna. And it's also nice then you're able to mix and match these, but still kind of bring it all together, glue it all together using Neve summing kind of at the end and also on all of your buses.
Yeah, that's one thing I think sometimes I hear from people, they're like, should I put Neve summing on my buses, and it's still on my main out? And I'm always like one of the things that was a surprise to me when I first started using Luna was like, it stacks wonderfully. It stacks beautifully. Like, sometimes with saturators and other companies' attempts at this kind of stuff, I feel like when you stack things, it gets a little mushy and starts making transients feel weird and all that. But like that just doesn't seem to be the case with this Neve summing. I mean, I send drums to it, and then you send all of that to a master, which also has it. It's like it feels like it really I don't know what you think, Ben, but it feels like it stacks really well for me.
Totally. And again, gain staging is super key. The only times I've ever gotten in trouble with it is when I was coming into everything a little too hot. Is saturation is one of those effects where like, especially if you're in a longer mixing session, if you've been working on a song, you've been sitting there listening to it over and over again for a couple of hours, you can start being like, yeah, crunchier is better, crunchier. And then like, either you send it off to the client or you listen back to it the next morning, fresh, and you're like, ooh, that's a little extra spicy. So that's the only situation I've ever found. And also the type of music really does matter too. Like there's some music that like dance music was not made with analog stuff in mind. So much of it, especially the modern EDM sound, is this in the box sound. It may sound better with the Neve summing turned off on a certain bus, but then you can pick and choose. Again, say you want your bass to have a little extra warmth, a little extra saturation, you can send your bass into a bass bus. You can do Command Shift B, call this bass bus. So I selected my track, Command Shift B, and it's now going to quickly route that bass into a bass bus with Neve summing on it. So now the rest of my mix, can stay super clean, but I can get that Neve saturation just on the bass. And so, for anyone's kind of, if what you wanted was to have Neve summing on more specific tracks, this is a great way to do it. You can just select tracks, create a bus, add the Neve summing there, and then of course you can also come in and leave it in on your main if you like. And that's also the reason why we gave you the headroom control. So if you do find yourself in the extra spicy mode, come over here to the headroom control and you can dial that back. So bring it to the left reduces the amount of saturation, kind of quote unquote raises the headroom of the unit. And allows a little bit more clean signal to come through before it saturates. So you have all sorts of controls over this stuff. And yeah, Neve summing, this is a great workflow to be able to add some analog color, some analog kind of warmth and glue to your sound. And especially if you start your mix off with this, it's a great way to start building a mix really fast. Nice. Any other questions coming in around the summing side of things, or we gotta trying to catch up here?
Luna's the cleanest looking GUI I've ever used. I agree. I love looking at Luna.
Yeah, not about summing, but Prince Jordan is asking if he buys an accelerator like Arrow. Are the plugins like preamps special for Apollo only? And no, you can use basically any UAD plugin with any UAD accelerator, but with Arrow particularly, you can use the Unison preamp plugins just like you can on a Apollo. So yeah, you're not missing anything out, or not missing out on anything if you get an Arrow instead of a bigger Apollo. Just less inputs and less DSP.
Nice. Yeah, and of course the way Luna's smart about the way it allocates that DSP too, right? So like using plugins down here in the inserts, if it's on a track that's not ARM enabled, it'll play back. It'll use the satellite as its DSP power, and then it reserves the ARM power for the onboard DSP.
Totally, yeah. So if you're somebody that uses a lot of plugins while mixing, but not a lot of plugins while recording, or maybe just don't do a lot of recording, you can get by with like a smaller interface and like an Octo satellite that'll let you run a couple while you're recording, and then plenty of plugins for mixing.
Yeah. Oh, and I do see all of you guys' questions in the chat. Here you go. The new and improved extra, extra, extra large cursor. Now, there's no chance you can miss it now, guys. I may not be clicking exactly where I want to click anymore, but we'll see. We'll see how this works.
Yeah.
All right. Is there a shortcut to select all the MIDI notes in a clip? Control A selects all notes on the track. Can I just select the notes inside of a clip? That's a good question. Let's find out. Unless Matt, you might know the answer off the top of your head.
Piano roll.
Don't believe there's a keyboard shortcut, but yeah, you can either lasso them just by clicking and dragging, or you can shift click multiple keys in the piano roll, I believe.
Well, and so if I remember correctly, now since I lassoed these notes and then hit Command A, they are they all now are selected. I've actually this tripped me up a couple times because I would come in and so now if I select all. Yep, these are still selecting all the notes. It kind of depends on where you click, essentially. So when I click up here in the header bar and hit Command A, it's now selecting the clips. And now, so now all my note commands aren't doing anything. The clips are what's selected here. But by clicking down inside of the note area of the clip and then hitting Command A, I'm now selecting all the notes. As you can see, I'm making them go up and down a note or two there. To show that you can select them all. So yeah, it all kind of matters where you put your cursor and what was selected first, and then hit Command A is a quick way to select them all.
Nice.
Can I expect latency when bouncing MIDI instrument tracks inside of Luna? Can you expect? No, you shouldn't. You should never expect latency. That latency is bad. Latency. No, you shouldn't have latency. I guess I've seen it once or twice where certain instruments would maybe not come back in perfectly on time. But I did also someone I saw was asking this earlier of how to export, how to change from MIDI into an audio track. It's a fairly simple process. Hit Option Command B to bring up the mix down menu. And by default, it's going to, want to export the main. But what you can do is if you click on main, it allows you to come in here and select specific tracks. So I can say, I want just my Tetra MIDI, my instrument channel here. Select that one, hit done, and then tell it where you want it to save to, what type of file you want it to be, hit mix down, and it will go through and render that track. All the way, from whatever select. If you have a selected area, it will do the selected area. And if you have, if you just have your playhead at the beginning, it'll just roll from the beginning till the signal dies out.
Yeah, so if that's not happening, I would consider that a bug, and submit that as feedback and let the team know that you're finding some erratic behavior there. Yep.
Once again, the second best feature of Luna right here, right? The feedback button. Just if you guys have ideas or if you run into problems, feedback's here for you. This is how we've found and located over a couple thousand bugs now that have been addressed in the Luna updates that have come out since launch. All right, scrolling back through to find some questions. Guys, I gotta say, clicking with this gigantic cursor is supremely difficult. I'm doing it for you.
I found a little pointer thing. I think it's called highlighter. Called highlighter that puts a circle around it. So nice. Next time I do something, I'll have that going. I'll have that going.
Yeah. Remember there's some good ones. We got the MIDI clips. Isn't it insert using Apollo DSP? I doubt I could add that on every channel. Well, Michael, so it depends. It depends on what state your track is in. So right now, since I'm not record enabled on any of these tracks, Luna in the background is using a combination of my Apollo DSP and my satellite DSP, so that if, say, I wanted to record my bass right here, I can put that into record mode, and it's automatically now loaded all my Unison plugins, my record effects, as well as these insert effects that I'm monitoring through. These have now been dynamically loaded where they need to be on that Apollo unit so that I can have all this in real time. Then when I unrecord it, it releases the Unison, it releases the record effects, and then wherever, it kind of just takes care of the allocation of all these things for you. So yeah, you still do have to be mindful of, the amount of DSP that you have, especially if you're going to do multi-track recording, right? Like if you were to record 8 tracks of drums, you got to be aware that you only have a certain amount of DSP available. So you may have to pick and choose, which ones get the heavy lifting and which ones maybe get some of the lighter weight processing. And there's some helpful tables even on the knowledge base. They'll let you know kind of what the approximate DSP usage is for each plugin. But this is one of those things, right? You have to, even if you were in like a real analog studio, you only have so many. I remember I had a studio where we only had 2 Neve preamps, and then we had 4 APIs, and then everything else was this like kind of crappy 8-channel interface, right? So you had to pick and choose. You had to say, all right, well, the kick drum's important. That gets the Neve, snares and overheads. I love how those sound through the APIs. So, it's not a new problem or a limitation. It's something that's very real in the world. You only have so many patch points and so many analog things. So the DSP is, it's a resource that you have to be smart about how you allocate it, especially when you're in tracking mode.
Tom Highland on YouTube has a good question. Do you have any advice on signal chain when using the Fender Tweed amp but don't want to commit the amp settings? Where would you use preamps like the Helios, and should I use the Unison slot?
Yeah, man, absolutely. So I've got a aux, a guitar track here kind of set up to record my aux, but let me just do a fresh one here that's set up to record my high Z input.
And while Ben's setting that up, we can also refer back to the ARM deep dive last Wednesday. We also, during that we talked about some tricks you can do that, with regards to the Fender and stereo and Unison, maybe some of which Ben's going to show us right now.
Oh yeah, dude. For the stereo, I'm not going to try to recreate Drew's stereo trick because it's marvelous. But yeah, it's go check out that ARM episode because being able to get stereo processing in ARM mode is fantastic. So I'll just show you here with the mono kind of version of it. So this is as if I had a guitar right now and I had plugged into the high Z input of my X8. So this is my default way of doing this is throwing it in the Unison slot. And so now the guitar is capturing the impedance of the Fender, the gain structure of it is responding just like a real amp. This is everyone's default, at least for me. This is the default I see almost everybody using their Unison, their Fender. But your question was, how do I do this without committing to the sound of the 55? It was fairly simple. Take the Fender 55 plugin. Don't go into record effects because these are also committed, and you want to drag it down here to the insert. So now it's just a monitor effect. But the one thing that you're now kind of losing out on is now you don't have the impedance modeling. So now you're just, kind of coming into a plain Jane high Z input. So this is the cool trick that I'm sure you've seen us maybe pull this off a couple times, but pull in something like the TS Overdrive or was it Dirt? Raw. Yep. Raw is another good one. So there's a couple of really great UAD guitar pedal emulations. Not to say that you have to distort your sound to get in there, but what you can do is you can come in here and then turn it off. So this tells the Unison preamp, hey, you're going into a guitar pedal, have the guitar pedal impedance, but now but I don't want any of the distortion. So now you've got the gain structure, you've got the impedance matching, and then I'm now recording a clean DI signal into my Fender 55. Totally a great way to do it. But as I think you were saying in your question, another cool thing that you can do is you can say, you know what, man, this was actually kind of a cool workflow, was to go straight into a console, right? Like just plug in, whether through a DI box or I know, in some studios they would even have just a 1/4 inch that was patched in and available on a channel. You can totally load something like the Helios or the Neve. I even remember seeing somebody, what company, I think it's JHS, has a box that is basically a Neve preamp in a stomp box.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
Right? Awesome. So you can totally do that. You can be on the high Z input and load up a 1073 and go nuts with the gain and get that distortion, get that color, or you can play it real safe and kind of in the easy mode here, where it's not going to add a lot of color and saturation to the sound. Just record it faithfully with a touch of Neve color, and then process it through the Fender 55 after the fact.
Yeah, and if you're doing it this way, I mean, obviously you could just leave the Fender in high Z mode to get even more gain when you're hitting the input of the Fender. It'll give you a little more crunchy, hot sound.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also use that switch, the very first switch on the left, switch into line mode, because the preamp's meant to boost the microphone signal up to line level. So what's coming out of the preamp is roughly line level. So that'll kind of match the input of the Fender a little more to the output of the preamp.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder, I've never tried this before, but let's see. Can I load a Fender up here and a Fender down here?
Mm-hmm. If you got DSP pairing, you should be able to. Yeah.
Which I do. So yeah. So you can run you can run a Fender into a Fender, because I saw someone ask here of like if it actually is if it matches the same impedance. And I don't know off the top of my head if it is exactly the same impedance setting between the two. Do you know, Matt?
No, it's not the same. And the Fender has like 4 different impedance interactions because so yeah, first of all, if you turn off the Fender amp, the plugin stays on, so you're not getting any of the gain of the amp, but you're still getting the impedance interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you click around to the 4 insert slots where you can do the different splits, that changes. There's a different impedance interaction for each one, just like the hardware.
Nice.
So yeah, you can get subtle different impedance interactions going here.
And so do you have to have the plugin turned on for the impedance to be changing around, or is what I'm doing right now, is this changing the impedance response?
Yeah, that's changing the impedance response. And that's kind of unique to the Fender. Not all of our amp plugins do that. Like the Marshall plugins, if you turn them off, the plugin itself turns off too, so the impedance interaction goes away.
Got it.
And it's the same thing with the Tube Screamer that you showed before. You can actually press the stop box button and the plugin stays on. So it's still passing signal.
Yeah.
Impedance interaction is still happening. So that's kind of a way to check if you can use a particular Unison plugin for that tweaky kind of Unison interaction. If you turn off the plugin in the GUI and the power button in the top bar stays lit, then it's still doing the impedance interaction.
Yeah, a really important point there, right? So yeah, I'm switching it off right now by using the power switch inside the box, which you can do by the switch or even on the light. But the one I'm leaving on is the one up here. So now if I were to turn this one off, now the impedance matching is not going to be active. But by leaving the plugin itself on, but just with the amp powered off, I'm now getting the impedance matching. So here we're able to get a clean DI signal, and then roll that into the actual Fender processing later on down the chain.
Yeah, so the only thing you're actually committing to here is the impedance interaction, which is pretty subtle. So you can still change whatever Fender after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
It does the gains. I found that like that gain matching is like, because it takes so much guesswork out of it. When you're using an amp sim, not in the Unison slot, then you're kind of guessing with how much gain the preamp is supposed to have, because all guitars are different. So that's one of the things so even in that sense, you're locking in that gain relationship, which is helpful.
Yeah. Let's see. Can you remind me how to change the gain? Oh, the 1073 from line to mic input when mixing. Yeah, man. It's one of my favorite things to show. So let me pull up. So here I've got this in a mix mode right now, and as you guys will notice, by default, this cursor is killing me. By default, when I get to off, that's it. I can go -20 to off. So if you want to get, if you're in line mode, if you're in mixing mode, and you want to get access to all that color, just come over here, click on the numbers, and that kind of jumps it over the gap of the off switch, and now you're accessing all of the mic gain even while you're in mix mode.
And on a related note, Ben, if you bring up the SSL channel strip, you can do the opposite, right? The unique work
yeah, dude.
A lot of people know about. It's the only way to get a transformer into the signal path. So if you pull up the E strip and you hit the reverse button, or the flip button, then of course it be careful there. It's an increasing gain, so don't do it while it's rolling, but then you can engage the X form or the transformer, and then in conjunction with the pad and the red gain knob, you open up a whole nother sort of color palette in that SSL channel strip that you couldn't get otherwise in mix mode.
I cannot overstate enough just how awesome of sound this is when you take a line level signal, especially when I'm in a mix process, like someone sends me a vocal that's, just recorded very clean. This is such a good way to add that real kind of classic, pop hip hop sort of color to a vocal super
Hi-fi.
fast.
Yeah, that hi-fi crispiness, but like in a really nice, sweet way.
Mm-hmm. Hit the flip button. And of course, yeah, like Drew mentioned, there's a 20 dB pad that you could do here, which kind of equalizes it out. But personally, what I like to do is hit the flip and then come over here to the fader and pull this down like 10 dB or so. So that helps you with the gain staging. But the little added bonus to this is now, this means that I'm now pushing everything in on this side of the plugin is now getting a little bit hotter of a signal, so the compressor acts a little bit faster. It brings the range for my expander up a little bit. It hits the EQ a little different. And again, like this isn't all of these things. They're not just functional. It's not just adding. This EQ doesn't just add 10 dB at 4K. It emulates what the console does, which is this really complex interaction of what it is that you're seeing, but also the circuitry, the transformers, the transistors, the chips, everything kind of all working together to give you a really analog sound. And you guys will also notice too, as we were talking in Matt's episode about Unison gain staging, there's so many gain stages in this one plugin, right? You've got your main input gain over here. Obviously, your dynamics can influence the gain. Your EQ can influence the gain. But then it goes into this VCA fader. And this isn't just a clean gain up and down. This is actually emulating what the VCA control does to the sound. And then finally, at the end, you've got this output. This is the only clean digital gain inside the plugin, which allows you to kind of trim it at the last moment. But that means you can go nuts if you really want to, right? You can come in here and you can just, if you want extra crispy, if that's how you like your bacon, you can crank the mic gain, just drive the crap out of it. You can come over here, compensate for it a little bit there, but then you can also compensate for it a little bit more over here. So you've got a lot of power, a lot of gain available to you for good and or for bad.
With great gain comes great responsibility.
That sounds like a t-shirt right there. If someone hasn't made that one yet. Does the SSL have tube drive or color buttons? No, this is the modeling the 4000E. So this was no tubes, no color buttons. I think that might be a newer feature of SSLs where they've kind of added some color things into it. But this is of the classic 4000E console channel strip.
This has the variable harmonic drive.
Yep.
The old stuff didn't.
Yeah, the old stuff you were driving chips nice and hot.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about getting Logic drummer tracks into Luna? Any best practices other than track export/import? Like to have things fluid and not just work with baked drummer tracks. Well, yeah, you answered the easiest solution is that export/import. I haven't really gotten a chance to play around much with Logic Drummer. Is there a way to get the MIDI data out of Logic Drummer and bring that in?
Or from the app, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think I haven't worked on it myself, Ben, but I know that we're all, the three of us are working on some potential future content where we plan on exploring that IAC bus, and MIDI interactions between different devices and so forth. So maybe in an upcoming episode we'll have something to show there. I'm not familiar with Logic, unfortunately, in that drummer plugin, so I can't answer that part. But
yeah, I mean, maybe there's somebody in the chat that's more using Logic Drummer a bunch. But yeah, as far as I know, it kind of like follows along with what you're playing, comes with, helps you invent drum parts for it. But yeah, if it has a MIDI export function, then yeah, you can bring that MIDI in, map it around to something like Shape or Battery or any other kind of a drum plugin, and then you'd have that sort of flexibility after the fact. Nice. Oh, so I was impressed with Fab showing off how he uses the Ocean Way reverb. That 3 mic stuff is super cool. Are there any other plugins like that? Great question. Yeah, so this is Prince. Good to see you again. So yeah, the Ocean Way Room, this is such a powerful, awesome plugin for kind of adding some room dimension and some, just add, giving you basically putting tracks inside of the room at Ocean Way, and then getting to move them around the room. You can go, in everybody's favorite positions for where to have the pianos, where to have the drums, strings, and of course you can also go over to Studio B. So Ocean Way, it's kind of a one-of-kind plugin in that sense. But since you asked, are there other plugins that do this? There sure are. The Capital Chambers is actually very similar in that sense, where we modeled the chambers that are below ground over at Capitol Studios. So the way a chamber works is you from the console at Capitol, you send off of your console, it goes, wires run all the way into a closet that has a big patch bay that then sends it down into 30, 50 feet below ground into a chamber, plays back through a speaker, bounces around the room with these super heavy shellacked walls, and then captured again by a microphone and then brought back up to your console. It's a lot of wire. There's the amount of cabling that was involved alone on top of the digging and the creating these spaces is insane. What was really cool about this is that this plugin allows you to do things that you can't really feasibly do in real life. Typically they set these up and then don't touch them for years at a time. It
was a big deal that they were willing to mess around with these setups for us. They allowed us to change things that hadn't been changed in many, many years. So they were really fortunate that they gave us that freedom.
Totally. And they allowed us to not only use the current mic setups, but also use some of the historical setups that they've had in there, which, include ribbon mics, the Altec 21Ds, the Sony C37. So here again, you can change the different types of microphones. You can move those microphones closer or further away from the speakers, which just kind of closes up the presence. But then again, you can also change chambers. So, I think in real life they have 8 chambers total. So we got to model 4 of them, including Al Schmidt's favorite, number 4. And so, you get to choose the room, you get to choose the mic position, the mic type, and then of course you get some other controls that you normally wouldn't have in the real world. In a chamber, you get what the chamber has. That's it. You basically have no control over anything besides how much you're sending into it, and you could add a pre-delay to it if you got fancy, but you don't have control over the decay or the width and stuff like this. So being able to not only move the microphones, select them, change the decay around, EQ, wet dry, it's a really powerful plugin. This is probably the most similar I can think of to the Ocean Way in terms of being able to place sound around a room. All right, catching up here on questions.
David Norris has a good one. Let's say I wanted to use Voxbox and also the Townsend Lab Sphere mic system. Can I use the Voxbox in Unison mode, or would that affect how the Townsend plugin works?
Good question.
I believe you have to use the Townsend plugin in the Unison slot. Is that right, Drew?
No, actually you don't. The Townsend mic is not a Unison. The Townsend plugin is not Unison enabled. So, but you can. Yeah, the answer is yes. You can use Unison with the Sphere plugin. It's of course you don't want to, if you saturate it too much and start to alter the harmonic content, you can start to impact the modeling. But if you look on the Townsend site, you'll notice that in their FAQ, Chris has a little post about it, and the coloration of the preamp, especially when in normal usage type situations, is not going to mess with the modeling at all. In fact, it makes the modeling sound better, in my opinion. I mean, it's like you still, even though it seems a little out of sequence, you're putting the preamp before the mic modeling. It doesn't really matter. Like in the grand scheme of things, you still get the benefits because the Sphere mic in and of itself sounds pretty darn good even without the modeling. It's a decent sounding, really good sounding mic. So it still benefits from the Unison coloration, and then you go into the, the Townsend plugin. So it's definitely something. It's a supported workflow so long as you're not overdriving too much.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that you would have to be careful of, right, would be if you say you use something, for whatever reason, you put some sort of dynamics processing before the Townsend plugin, right?
That you wouldn't want to do. You probably would want to shy away from that. Even that is not super. Even that is not a deal breaker if it's slightly, but there's just not a lot of benefit to doing that. The only thing that the Sphere plugin really cares about is that the front, whatever's done to the front capsule is done to the rear capsule in equal parts. Yeah. And if you have a linked compressor, it still should do it to both. But I would definitely, I would recommend using Unison, but maybe shy away from the shy away from the dynamics, and I would also shy away from the filtering because the Townsend plugin has filtering built into it. It has high pass filtering in it, and which I generally like to do there because it's actually it's just done within the model, so it seems a little more comprehensive.
Absolutely. Let's see.
So I have a Facebook question. Somebody's asking about putting the Marshall Blues Breaker in the Unison preamp and then outputting it in stereo. That would follow a similar procedure that we did in the ARM deep dive, where you're going to utilize utilize the distortion pedal bypassed and then put this on a stereo aux.
Yeah.
So refer back to our ARM deep dive video to see how we did that with the Fender, and you would do the similar thing with that one.
Absolutely. I think I saw a question come up earlier. Someone that was asking about if Luna and Firewire will ever work together. Pretty sure that's we don't usually comment on future things, but that's a past thing, and Firewire just doesn't have the bandwidth to support this sort of thing, right, Drew?
Yeah, it's definitely, and same goes for, traditional USB. People ask why are the unit numbers, why are the system, Apollo Expanded kind of needs Thunderbolt. It needs the bandwidth, it needs the peer-to-peer networking protocol, and USB just doesn't have the headroom, and it has a little bit more overhead than Apollo Expanded really needs to run up to 6 devices, which is what we support. So.
Yeah. Nice, dude. We're crushing through all these questions today.
Yeah,
loving it. Well, I had one in our doc here that it's been sitting there for a bit that it would be really good to show people, and that's the for any of you guys that are working with Melodyne inside of Luna, there's one thing that Drew brought to my attention that is super important to know. So by default, when you transfer some signal in to Melodyne, it's going to automatically transfer that not into, Luna doesn't have project folders yet. And so it will automatically transfer this into your Melodyne folder on your home drive, right? So you'll notice, like, when I come here to project, it says transfers folder. It's not set for this project. And so what you can do is if you bring up this little icon here, over here on the project side, and then you can set a path for transfer. And you can do this before you do the transfers, and I tested this. You can do it afterwards. So say you've already gone through your Melodyne and everything, and then you're like, oh, Ben told me I need to, these are going to be saved on my project or on my user hard drive instead of next to my project. You can do this after the fact, and Melodyne will move them all for you. So you set your path for transfer. That brings up your window. You can say, cool, transfer into there, and now it's going to be working. It's going to be placing all of its temporary tracks into that folder. So I find it usually helps to go ahead and say, to make a Melodyne folder for yourself wherever your project is, or if you're working with a client, if you've got like an artist folder, you can have all their songs in there, but then you can make a Melodyne folder specifically for them. And the reason why this matters is if you're going to send the session to somebody else.
For backup too, for backup.
Exactly. Yeah, I discovered I had a bunch of Melodynes sitting on my user hard drive that were, they're getting time machined, and they're everything in my system gets backed up somehow, but they weren't being together along with the project file.
Yeah, and if you're a Pro Tools user, you might be thinking, "Oh, I've never had to worry about this," and that's just Melodyne will automatically default to the Pro Tools session folder and take care of that. So.
Yeah. Any updates on the fix for the 106? Love the reverse, but there's been issues with pops and clicks. So pops and clicks are not good. It seems like it's not everybody that's experiencing a ton of pops and clicks, but I can give you guys a couple of suggestions. Just in general, if you are running into some issues or things that are a little bit weird. The first one that I've found, even if I've had any weirdness happening, is switching over to real-time mixdown. It's often not that much slower. Sometimes I've even had sessions where it's actually faster to do real time than it is to do offline bounce. So number one suggestion would be come over here, do real time mixdown. This now, it plays through it all in real time. Nothing can, it seems to prevent a bunch of those pops and clicks. And and or any other kind of playback issues that you guys are having. So that'd be my first suggestion to look at. Trying to think of some of the other, I had some sessions that were having some weirdness with the tape decks. Typically in a session you'll have A and B loaded, but I had 1 or 2 sessions that got bugged out when I was using C and D. So just removing the tape from those decks seemed to solve those problems. And then if you guys are still getting some weird issues around that, hit the feedback button, let us know. And Drew, is there a way if someone needed to roll back, if say they are on 106 and it's not working for them,
the procedure there is if you go to the Luna release notes, so if you go to help.uaudio.com or if you just Google UAD Luna release notes, on the release notes page is a link for all the previous downloads. So if you go to the release notes, if you can find that, just do Luna release notes. Then click on that, and if you scroll down, you'll notice that version 106 is the one that's on the site. But if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see a link. So for there's your download this version. That allows you to jump back.
Nice. So the old version, and I think it looks like it's just 105 is the only one they can really roll back to the moment.
We're going to be doing moving forward. We're going to be doing that moving forward.
Archiving those, nice.
Yeah. Hey, I started to interrupt, but I got to jump. So I will see you guys next time. Got to get started here. And
awesome. Well, thanks, Drew. Yeah, good hang, bro.
Yeah, likewise.
Nice.
One other thing on the clicks and pops, just as far as troubleshooting that kind of stuff, if you're on 106 or any other version you're having clicks and pops, try, if you have like an external monitor, try disconnecting that. Not necessarily as like a permanent solution, but if disconnecting your monitor does solve that problem, we'd like to hear about it. Submit feedback and let us know. And same thing with any kind of like Thunderbolt hubs or USB hubs. Pretty much pare down your peripherals to connect to your computer as much as you can. And if you can narrow it down to one specific thing that's like causing render meter spikes or pops and clicks in Luna, we definitely want to know about it. So hit that feedback button.
Nice. Luna session was saved at 44.1 and loads up at 88.2. Any ideas? Yeah. So this is this is a feature, not a bug. So Luna doesn't care what sample rate it was recorded at or what sample rate you're playing back at. It is totally flexible. So I'm not going to do this live on air because it'll totally hose our stream up. But in Luna, you can come down and select any sample rate, and it will just hold the sample rate, and then you can actually mix and match files. So I could be on a 48 kilohertz setting right now. I could drag in some 88.2 audio files, and Luna in real time will do sample rate conversion, and then in the background it's doing a rendered version of that to save CPU power. But yeah, it allows you to do a session at any sample rate and then kind of revert it. The reason why we did this is so that you could say, say you're doing a tracking session, you can record at 96. When you're just tracking, you're not doing a ton of mixing or processing yet. Great, go 96, capture all the detail just in case, or because it sounds good and it's even lower latency at 96 than at 48. Right. Track it in, and then when you get to the mixing stage, if you find that you're running out of power, or you've now added a ton of tracks, or say you go to the editing process and you just want to quickly be zooming around, you can just change the sample rate inside of Luna down to 44 or 48, and then again when you get back to the mix down, you can go back up to 96 and then render it. It may take longer because it's you're making especially all the native processes think twice as hard, but it's meant to be flexible and agnostic, and the one thing it will never do is chipmunk your vocals, or it won't get those sample rate mismatch sort of errors because it's doing all the hard work in the background.
Yeah, if you start a session at 96 or something that just becomes a behemoth and your computer can't handle it anymore, you can always just downsample it, give your computer a little bit more breathing room.
Yep, exactly. Nice. So what about the render meter going all crazy? Hard to tell what would be making a render meter go extra crazy. Like Matt mentioned, sometimes it's external monitors. It could be a lot of like I know with on Fab's Tales from the Switch, we're having a lot of troubles with one of the newfangled limiter that he was trying to use on his main bus. As soon as we disabled that plugin, it dropped from like in the red nonstop back down to like 60%, and it would play nice. So it can be as simple as a plugin really kind of overtaxing the system. Anything else that you can think of that helps with the render meter, Matt?
If you're on a MacBook, make sure your power supply is connected to the right side and the left side. There's some known issues with connecting to the left side that can cause the fans to go crazy and stuff like that.
Oh, Danielle's saying she's got her render reading is over 300%, but her processors are only showing 15% used. That sounds like a bug.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a bug. Submit feedback with as much info as you can. And Danielle specifically, if you're having that problem and you're trying to export and you're getting high render meter and pops and clicks, a trick can be to, before you export, grab the Luna window and actually minimize it to be much smaller. And you can export that way. And basically it frees up some of the GPU resources that Luna may be using and may be causing your computer to
so just doing this.
Yeah, that can actually reduce your render meter usage, reduce your CPU usage. And it's not like a permanent fix because you can't do much in the timeline, obviously, but it can allow you to export without issues or do certain things without issues. So
yeah, my render meter went from 24 back up to 25.
There you go.
But I'm on a big desktop system with a heavy duty AMD graphics card. So typically I've been really lucky with this system of having plenty of horsepower to spare. But yeah, I can see that does make a bit of a difference. I'd never heard of that one before, man. That's really helpful.
Yeah, it's a weird one, but it definitely works, especially if you're on like a MacBook where the integrated graphics and the GPU resources and the CPU resources are kind of one and the same and they're shared.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and it probably goes without saying, but also just anything else that's using CPU in the background of your computer. If you have open up activity monitor, look at the CPU tab. If you have anything that's just like running in the background that you don't need that's using CPU cycles, kill those. That'll help with any DAW.
Yeah, we've had, again, speaking with some of the issues that I've worked through with Fab, is having Dropbox sitting here and syncing the whole time, especially because he was working in his Dropbox. So, Luna session saved inside Dropbox, opened that up, and then Dropbox trying to work in the background. Luna's just constantly, there's no saving. It's constantly, that means it's constantly saving to that file. It's constantly writing to the database inside of your Luna session. So anything that's kind of trying to constantly synchronize that to the internet, that's can often be a cause for that. So yeah, also to investigate where your sessions are located. Preferably on an SSD. Is there a difference between using your system drive versus like a dedicated project drive for sessions?
As long as it's a SSD and as long as it's connected, USB 3 or higher, it won't be an issue. You'll have enough bandwidth there.
Mm-hmm. Could my Time Machine drive be doing anything to make it worse? If Time Machine's sitting there running, it might.
Anything that's doing constant checks, like Google Drive, Dropbox, could be Time Machine if it's like constantly syncing. Antivirus software, every time you make a change to Luna's database, if your antivirus software is trying to scan it and make sure it's not malicious, that can be a problem.
Yes. Matt commented, real-time mixdown solves any latency when exporting Midi to audio track. Hope that's helpful. Yeah, that's super helpful. So yeah, that's real-time. I'm kind of used to real-time mixdown from working the way I've always kind of bounced my sessions in Pro Tools. It was always in a real-time fashion. So that little extra bit of time doesn't typically it's kind of nice to listen to what you're working on, right? Like it's nice to get that little step back. All right, guys. Well, this is, man, the hour just flies by when we're just doing questions. You guys had such good questions today.
Great ones.
Wrap it up. So you guys you're asking about sidechain compression, about multiple session versions. Obviously people are still wondering about Windows. These are all great suggestions. The team knows about them. They know about them, but you guys can still also have an influence on what gets developed next by hitting us with some feedback. So get up there, hit the feedback button, let them know, because we have dashboards in our background now that are helping us kind of prioritize these things by what you guys need most. So control surface support, sidechain, all these, multiple session versions, audio file management, all these kind of like ones that keep on coming up and up again. You may don't just assume that everyone else has already said it. Get in there, hit us with the feedback, because your feedback counts, and it helps us know how important these things are to all of our users as a community. So yeah, definitely hit that up.
Yeah, we'd rather you submit the same thing multiple times than forget to submit it. You're not going to annoy us. Submit feedback as much as you can. That helps.
Yeah, and you guys are getting to shape this. You guys are getting to shape Luna, man. It's such a cool thing to see. There's like Connor mentioned last week or week before when we did the 106 episode. There's been things that they didn't expect you guys to want so badly that they were then they quickly implemented in these dot releases, and just know that they are also working towards some bigger feature releases coming up here soon. So in the feature releases, 1.1, that's going to be a lot of requested features going to be making into there. So keep hitting with the feedback. Let us know what you guys want to see. Someone asked, did I miss a control surface update info? No, you didn't miss it. We know about it. We know people really want it, but keep on telling us, because it's helpful to gauge the interest in that. And yeah, I know they're investigating what the solution should be on that right now.
Yep.
So yeah, guys, what a fun Monday. Good, great questions, everybody. Glad you guys could hang out with us and kind of enjoying what we're doing here. If you guys do have more questions in the meantime, just feel free to hit us up. Facebook, UAD forums, live at uaudio.com if you've got show suggestions or music. Hashtag Universal Audio if you've got photos to share. And we are going to be back. We've got tomorrow. We're back with Fab and Lewis. They're continuing to do their remote recording session, working on that song. That's gonna be super fun. I love how that dude Lewis he's such a beast.
Lewis is amazing. Yeah. Any instrument he touches, it's just like, oh, I gotta quit that instrument.
I know, man. So yeah, we're back with Fab and Lewis tomorrow, and then on Thursday, I believe we're going to be doing a shape deep dive with Tom. So similar to how what Drew gave us last week on ARM, we're going to do basically the same thing, but all about shape. Because as much as we've shown shape, especially in those first couple of weeks here on office hours, we only scratched the surface. Like that thing does. It's not only packed with a ton of sounds, it's got a lot of functionality and effects and some really cool advanced features that we haven't even gotten to really showcase here on stream yet. So we're going to be Thursday morning, I believe, with that program. So yeah, mark your calendars. And when will Ben get a haircut? Yeah, everyone's asking.
When we let him out of his house again.
Yeah, exactly. When UA releases me from this room and allows me to see the sunshine. I don't know, man. I'm thinking about, like, I used to have long hair. I mean, some people who know my old PureMix videos, you guys remember the long hair, Ben?
It's getting to that length.
Yeah, I know. It's starting to hit the eyes. Yeah, it's great. But yeah, solidarity. We're all in quarantine together. So yeah, guys, fun hanging out with you guys. Have a great Monday, and I'll see you guys all back here tomorrow.
Right on. See you tomorrow, guys.